It's the mid-'80s in Southern California, and Lester Kasai and Tony Hawk are doing what they normally do on any average day. Skating the Del Mar pool, wearing bright, colorful outfits, and planning to treat themselves to a delicious Japanese-inspired meal after the session. But unknown to these two skaters, on this day, Lester was going to invent a trick that would go down in skating as one of the most taboo tricks of all time. The trick we all now know as the Benihana. But why does this trick get so much ridicule? And where did the shit-talking start? Let's take a look back at the history of the trick from its creation to the few that adopted it, and how it's become skating's kookiest trick. To start our journey, we'll need to head back to that era, a time where skating was wholly consumed by vert ramps, sleeveless t-shirts, and larger-than-life personalities. To get a grip on the history of the trick's creation, I wanted to first get in touch with the witness himself, Tony Hawk.
I think I have a handle on how it all came to be, so I'm not sure about the exact date. I want to say it was around 83 or 84. The big trick back then was thrusters, which is a fakie foot plant. But if you do it properly, you actually like boost up on the way, and then you put your foot on like as you sort of reach your peak. And so Lester and I were doing thrusters, and then I'm pretty sure he missed his foot one time on the coping and ended up just in this position of like a tail grab one foot. It looked like he was gonna make it. And then I was like, oh, what if you just did that? Like fakey ollie tail grab one foot and don't put your foot on the coping at all. And I don't know, like 10 minutes later, he did a Benihana.
Let's pause for a second here. You heard that right. The original Benihana was not a Hail Mary trick designed for flying out of a quarter pipe as we know it today. It's actually a fakie trick that comes directly from a very popular vert trick. So where did the trick we all think of as the Benihana nowadays come from?
When he did it front side, which is what people know as Benihana now, he called that a Benny Bonga.
Okay, so stay with me here. Let's ignore the fact that Benny Bonga is one of the goofiest sounding trick names of all time. And let's figure out where these names came from. 80s trick names are some of the most over-the-top and creative names in skating. So there's gotta be a reason Lester chose such a wild name for this trick. I had to get on the phone with Lester to try to figure out what his idea was behind it.
Me and Tony were always trying to like brainstorming, trying to come up with new tricks that's never been done. And I think the Benihana was just one of them that kind of came out of that. It was a lot of goofing around and, just trying crazy stuff. And, I think we were all kind of inspired by Neil Blender. He was so creative in the tricks that he's trying to come up with. And not only that, but also like naming them, coming up with these crazy names that are just funny and cool. And I think we're just kind of like, we're following suit,
Neil's influence on skateboard in the 80s just can't be underestimated, and he's contributed some of the craziest trick names ever seen.
I mean, a lot of it started with the Whittier crew, Lance, Mountain, Neil, Jeff Grosso. Lester was part of that, and those guys would just come up with funny names for tricks. Lester and I, our nice dinner going out was Benihana. I mean, that was, Benihana was like a spectacle back then. He and I had just started making some money, so we thought we were really living large. We went to Benihana. He and I named a bunch of tricks back. Like he named the Madonna, probably around the same time. I was complaining to him that I've been creating a bunch of tricks and no one does them. And he said, well, if you learn a new trick, you got to name it something trendy. And I said, well, what about this, one-footed lean to tail I just learned? And he goes, yeah, Madonna. She's the trendiest.
So obviously, Lester had a knack for naming tricks if he coined the name of one of the most popular vert tricks of the time. But unlike Tony's Madonna, Lester's Benihana, although more popular today for different reasons, never gained much notoriety from skaters in the 80s. Lester himself didn't even do the trick all that often.
And actually, I really didn't do them that much. And then I tried them like recently, and I can't even do them anymore.
Did you ever have like an ad or anything like that where you were doing a Benihana or a Benny Bonga?
I don't think I've ever had anything like actually like an ad. I had like maybe a poster, but it actually looked really bad.
It was like,
It was a bad one. It was a bad one.
Lester not doing too many Benihanas or Benny Bongas could explain where the name mix-up occurred. The two tricks look relatively similar, and even in the few cases where a big name like Christian Hosoi was doing them, the name had already been attributed to the frontside version.
It's weird how the name just got taken. I just call them Bennies. I have people coming up to me all the time about it, and Grasso was one of them. Was like, hey, come on, let's get the story straight, because he was like, dude, we got to get the story straight on everything, He's like a historian, right? He's like, this is how it was. Either way, it doesn't bother me. It's cool with me. Like, if everybody wants to call it a Benihana or a Benibanga or whatever, it's all good with me, man.
So whatever we call it, what made this leg dangling trick stick around? And how did it transition from being a relatively unpopular vert trick to becoming the unofficial goofiest trick in skating? So to dive deeper, I decided to get some insight from skate culture aficionado, Sean Mortimer.
Hey, can you hear me?
Sean was a pro for Powell back in the day and has also written several books on skate history and culture, so he seemed like a perfect expert in helping track the root of the Benihana hate.
I mean, the interesting thing to me about tricks is, in hindsight, it might seem a little clear-cut, but I don't think tricks, when you invent them or develop them or other people start doing them, it's so clear what they are. The physical space you have to get into Benihana is very restrictive and not super expressive besides how far you take your foot off. But you look at Hisoi doing a judo air tweaked, and then you look at someone doing a tweaked Benihana, and they're not even the same. There was a point sort of in the 90s where any 80s stuff was pushed away really, really hard, especially vert, It was really aggressive. And I think that was just a generational thing.
But this cultural push away from vert to make way for street skating in the 90s didn't completely erase the trick from existence. For instance, John Cardiel showed up on video and even in a Thrasher trick tip for what cards called the Stayin' Alive, throwing a street Benny at EMB in the early 90s of all places. Another example is Jamie Thomas, who used to do them in the 90s on street, inspired by Cardiel. Not only can he be seen throwing a big Benny down a huge double set and hometown heroing one over a car for the crowd, there's even a story about him wanting to do one down the Gons Gap at EMB, but Gabe Morford refusing to shoot a photo of it out of objection to having his name attached to the trick. But why did Jamie choose such a crazy trick to add to his list when there's so many more stylish ones to throw down big gaps?
Well, that was the thing. To me, it's like the mustache of skating. You don't know, like, is that guy trying to be super ironic, or is he like, is that cool? Like, honestly, and it's awesome that way. Certain tricks, even like a Benihana, you wouldn't think of how gnarly it is at first because that prejudice against it would just make you go, oh. But I actually think that was a unique tool that people use to sort of open up skating. It was kind of like a crowbar, is that you would utilize that trick in a way that would make people think of the trick differently or skating differently. I mean, people were literally essentially saying, you can't do this. This is not how you skate. And it turned into a way to, to kind of break out of that mold.
And no skater is known for using the Benihana in this way more than Andy McDonald, a pro known for doing his own thing no matter what people say. And just like the yellow helmet, Andy liked the Benihana, and he wasn't afraid to admit it.
I was introduced to the Benihana via Christian Hisoi when I was a Grom at Woodward Skate Camp. Right away started trying to learn it the way that Christian does it, because I think he's done some of the best ones. And then, why is Benihana get a bad rap? Like, blah, blah. And I was like, because they took it to street. Because to me, it's a vert trick, like it just doesn't look nearly as cool to do it down steps, or certainly to do it like you see the kids do it, where it gets its really bad rep is like the fly out onto flat, fly out of the bowl at the local skate park, Benihana onto the ground. No, it's an interesting conundrum, because if you could just flat out say like, oh, it's a kook, only kooks do it, blah blah, that'd be one thing. But you can't really, because you look back. Like I remember seeing Ronnie Krager do Benihana finger flip over a fun box. Just yesterday was Jamie Thomas's birthday, and Dave Swift posted a photo from his interview doing a Benihana at EG in San Diego, and I'm like, there's the Chief doing one. They can't be all that bad.
So after getting to talk about the trick with these pros, I'm left wondering, is the Benihana really a whack trick? Well, the short answer is yes. In a lot of cases, street especially, it looks pretty damn goofy. But what I'm really asking myself is if that's a bad thing. At the end of the day, skateboards are toys, and we're all just playing around trying to have a good time. For Lester and Tony, the Benihana is a memory of them being kids, having fun, and making up tricks at Del Mar. For Andy, the Benihana is genuinely a cool trick that he likes to do. And for Sean, it's a unique reminder of what skating's really about and the culture surrounding that. So, whatever you may want to call it, a Benihana, a Benibanga, a Benny, or even a Stayin' Alive, the next time you see someone blasting out at the skate park, back leg dangling behind them, just remember that you're lucky enough to get the joke. Or that they have bad taste. But either way, you get to laugh about it.